Fire Sword, Chapter 13, Divine Revival. Tiki had not woken up for one moment since the shepherds began their journey to the divine grounds where she would regain her power. This worried some of them, but Say reassured her that the voice would be just fine as soon as they reached their destination. Nonetheless, Crom insisted on her being guarded at all times by volunteers, most of the time which happened to be Owain and Inigo. Kazuto, Klein, and Robin quickly established a routine for their daily activities. On days that they would march, the three men would meet up for breakfast and discuss strategies for how to take on Valmy's fortresses and castles. They also did research on places that would be critical to capture, sometimes with input from Varayan, Shurche, and Seri. These conversations would continue during the morning march until it was time for a mid-afternoon repast. After that, the three of them would go their separate ways, Kazuto often going to spend time with his family. Robin would usually go to talk with Crom for military and recreational purposes. However, he was also known to spend time with Lucina over a meal or two. Klein would often accompany Cordelia on her scouting missions, using his salamander wings to keep up with her dark flyer Pegasus. Of course, there were days when they did not have to move camp. Robin and Crom insisted on doing this at least once a week in order to give the troops a rest, unless there was a pressing matter at hand, such as when they had to relieve some of the Feroxy forces caught up in an engagement with a city that proved to be a tough nut to crack. The heroes of Einkrad proved even more helpful than before with their abilities to fly restored. On days when they were able to relax, the three men would often still have breakfast together, but immediately afterward would instead set about keeping their combat skills sharp. Of course, for Kirito, this meant that he would often practice swordsmanship with Asuna. Yui would often be a very vocal spectator to these matches, cheering for both of her parents on. Of course, Suguha and Klein would often challenge Kirito themselves, trying to see if they could finally find a way to defeat his dual-wielding style. Of course, needless to say, nobody had yet to defeat the Black Swordsman. Even so, Kirito kept in the back of his mind the promise that Lanku had made to him, that he would fight him for real someday. It was a fight he eagerly anticipated. In those afternoons, the warriors of Alfheim would take flight in a race to see who was the fastest. In the old days, it would have been Lifa and Kirito who were always in the lead. But ever since Yui had become human, she startled everyone with her blinding speed and flight. The first race that she took part in, she managed to outpace Kirito and nearly passed Lifa, though the cousin of Kazuto was declared the winner by the spectators. The day before they were to reach the Divine Dragon Grounds, Kirito won the race by a hair, and he smiled at the others as they landed beside him. "Guess I'm still a top player," he said cockily. "Oh yeah?" Lifa said as she landed. "Then how come you don't use magic here?" Yui landed right after her and rolled her shoulders, trying to ease some of the stress on her back. It seemed that their wings actually put a physical strain on their bodies now that they were real. "Don't have the time," Kazuto shot back at his cousin. "Gotta keep up with strategy meetings and sword practice, you know?" "That or he just can't use it," Sinon said as she and Asuna landed softly. Klein was the last to land, much to his disappointment. I don't need it," he sniffed. "Kirito, this is what happens when you show off," Asuna giggled. "Aren't you ever going to learn?" "Well, you said it once," Kazuto said as he moved to rub his wife's back. "Doesn't matter where I am. As soon as I lose focus, I space out like a champ." She smiled at the memory and strong fingers that massaged her sore back. "Thanks, Kirito," she said. Looking at the others, she asked, "So who's hungry? I don't know you, but I am pretty hungry." "Are you making dinner, Mommy?" Yui asked excitedly. "No, honey, not until tomorrow," Asuna said as she picked up her daughter. Even though the girl was biologically 10 by now, she was still small for her age, enabling her parents to still carry her a bit. However, they did realize that over the course of the months, she was starting to grow more. In a way, they were glad to see her finally able to grow older with them, but at the same time, it was saddening. They knew that one day she would grow up without them and be able to lead her own life. Again, part of them wanted that for her, but the other part of them wanted their little girl to stay little forever. Being a parent is hard sometimes, thought Asuna. But she forced herself to cast away the sad thoughts. They still had plenty of time with Yui, and it didn't need to be clouded over with negative thoughts. They should be as happy as possible, she decided. "Come on," she said as she started toward the mess tent. "Maybe Gaius was in charge of cooking tonight." Later that night, Suguha was practicing magic under the supervision of Riken, a young man who somewhat reminded her of her friend Rekon. He was the shepherd's recognized expert on wind magic, which was what Suguha wanted to learn, as it reminded her a bit of the type of magic the Sylphs used. She had picked up on the process quickly enough by Riken's standards, but as of yet, he still advised her to use her sword most of the time in combat. "Hey Riken," she asked, "how come I shouldn't use magic in battle yet? I'm already moving on to the Elwyn spell. Isn't that the standard battle spell expected of a shepherd?" "Well, yeah," Riken admitted, "but if you use magic on the battlefield, you become a higher priority target for mages and other archers. You'd be in more danger." "Battle is dangerous anyways," Suguha said with a frown. "So why shouldn't I use everything I got? That's what Big Brother does all the time." "Yeah, but..." Riken sighed. "Alright, fine. I'll give you clearance to use magic in battle. Just Be careful, okay? I will. Suguha promised, once again reminded of Rekon. Alright, now I gotta tell Garabin so he can incorporate your magic into his strategies, Rickon said. And we're done with practice anyways. Good night, Lifa. Good night, Rickon, Suguha replied. Once he was gone, she put away the book and turned to face one of the dummies that was still standing. Raising her hands the way she would in Alfheim to cast a spell, she chanted, Ek, Skit, Tutugu, Smar, Strua. Nothing happened. No magical runes appeared, no wind needles flew from her hands to strike the dummy. Sighing to herself, she muttered, worth a shot. As she turned to go, she was struck by another thought. Turning to face the dummy again, she decided to try something slightly different. Positioning herself like she noticed most mages cast spells on the shepherds, she outstretched one hand with her palm open. Elwind, she called out. To her great surprise, glyphs formed around her and a blade of wind shot out from her palm to slice the dummy clean in two. She gasped and took a few paces backwards in shock. She'd just been experimenting, but she hadn't actually expected that to work. She was just shaking her head to clear it. She ran off to find her brother. He needed to know about this, as did Robin. It would likely open up some new possibilities for the fighters from Earth. They reached the Divine Grounds late in the morning. The ALO players were all talking quietly amongst themselves about Suguha's discovery and practicing it with smaller spells, even Kazuto, who normally avoided the use of magic. They quickly discovered that each of them were able to cast a certain element without a tome, except for Yui, much to her disappointment. Lifa and Sinon were able to cast wind spells, while Klein could use fire magic. Asuna found that she could cast lightning, which made Kazuto laugh and revive her nickname Lightning Flash. The Black Swordsman was surprised that he was now capable of casting dark magic spells, which he had only ever seen Tharja and Henry cast, never used it himself. He decided a visit with Henry would be due, but before he could approach the silver-haired mage, they saw their goal. When they reached their destination, they were all taken back by the beauty and tranquility of the place. Lush green grass grew all the way across the cliff face where clear blue water flowed below a natural rock bridge that led across the river below. After they had crossed the natural wonder to reach the small island, it was easy to see the flowers that dotted the landscape, catching Yui's attention, like they had at the place before they found Inigo and Klein. The only one that seemed unaffected by the area was Robin, but Kazuto knew that he had been having trouble with headaches as of late, so it was understandable he wasn't in the mood to sightsee. When they reached the ruins of an old stone structure, Tiki began to stir slightly, much to the shepherd's relief. Many of them had been worried that even if they got her body to the ground safely, she would not be able to stir. As soon as she was laid down on the grass, energy began to flow from the ground into her body. Lady Seri, is she alright? Lucina asked with some concern when Tiki made no more movement for some minutes. Aye, the other princess nodded. She is communing with the sacred grounds, taking in the power of the divine dragon. She will be well afterwards, provided she remains unmoved and undisturbed. That might not be an option, Robin said tightly. Look. He pointed across the land bridge that they had come across. Now approaching was a swarm of Risen, prompting shouts of surprise from the shepherds. After everyone had been warned, Robin said, We need to get out of here before Tiki gets hurt. Nay, we cannot, Seri replied quickly. If we move her in this condition, she may never wake up. We must defend her until she regains consciousness. Are you certain we cannot move her? Crom asked, his hand on falchion. I am, Seri nodded. Apologies, my lord, I did not mean for this to happen. No one did, and you couldn't have seen it coming. Robin sighed as he readied his thunder tome. Runes began to swirl as he called out, Shepherd! Protect the voice at all costs! Form up in the horseshoe defense pattern! Looking over at Kirito, who already had his swords drawn, he added, Get us some air support. Yeah, you got it, he said as he beat his black spriggan wings to shoot up into the sky. Klein! He called as they all descended. Any ideas? Normally I'd say just to destroy the bridge, but then it'd be impossible to get everyone back to the mainland, the salamander said with a deep frown. The only thing I can think of is to thin him out as much as possible so that way the shepherds don't end up getting overrun. Guys, Asuna said as she floated near them, we've got more than one problem to deal with here. She pointed at a number of airborne Risen headed toward them on griffins, pegasi, and wyverns. Ah, crap, Klein groaned. Yui, go back, stay with the healers, Kirito ordered his daughter. We need you safe so you can heal us, got it? But I want to stay and help, Yui protested. You always send me back. I know. And someday when you have kids of your own, you'll understand, Kirito replied tightly. Just, please, go back with the others, okay? Yes, Daddy, Yui sighed as she descended on her white wings. As she did that, Kirito held his swords on either side and said, Sinon, I need you to snipe the ones above the bridge so they crash into the zombies on the ground. Asuna and Klein, back me up any way you can. We can't let these things near Tiki or else she's toast. Done, Sinon said as she readied her bow and arrows. I'm with you, buddy. Klein grinned crookedly again. Just like the World Tree, all over again, Lifa added. Asuna simply reached out and squeezed his arm encouragingly, and he smiled back at her briefly. Once again, words weren't necessary. They both knew how much they loved each other through thick and thin. Then the time had come to act. Asuna started off by unleashing a spiderweb of lightning via an art thunder spell to strike at the oncoming monsters. Lifa also attacked with magic to cut down a pair of griffin riders with her Elwyn spell. Klein had their backs by letting loose a river of fire with arc fire attacks. Sinon added to the long-range assault with arrows fired from her longbow. Kirito, however, simply dove into the fray, his dual blades wreaking terrible havoc on whichever monsters dared to come too close to his attacks. He was a genius in combat, throwing one of his swords to stick into the chest of a risen dark flyer, and grabbing another rider off its steed in the same motion. He then cast it downward at the ground troops, hitting 3 of them, then zooming over to take his sword out of the first zombie. He was a tornado of black wings and swords as he cut through the squad that attempted to surround him. The shepherds were easily able to hold off the horde, weakened as it was by their efforts to thin the ranks. It seemed they would get through the attack without even a scratch. Up until Kirito was caught off guard with a sword in his arm, he retreated, shouting angrily at the risen that had stabbed him. Yui saw him get wounded, and her staff flared with light as she cast physic to heal him. Once he had been healed, she ground her teeth in frustration. There had to be something more she could do. There just had to be. Suddenly, a small, warm hand came to rest on her ankle. Looking down, Yui was surprised to see Tiki looking up at her with half-open eyes. "You can help them," she said quietly. Yui was barely able to hear the ancient Manakite above the din of battle. "You have the power of the divines flowing through you. Take of that power, Princess of Aincrad. Fight no matter what others may say." "Fight, Yui Kirigaya." A soft glow emanated from her hand, and new knowledge flowed through Yui's mind. Her wings flared and she shot into the sky. Looking at a cluster of risen charging at her mother and the others, she shot forward, her staff and tome left behind on the ground. When she shot past Asuna and the others, who all cried out in shock, her face set to the same determined mask she had worn when she had faced off against the fatal scythe. Glyphs swirled around her as she halted before the squadron, which seemed to be almost afraid of the symbols whirling around her small body. Outstretching her hand, she cried out, "Jaisha!" A brilliant beam of pure white light was unleashed from her hand to strike the group of flyers, and the others lost sight of them for a moment. No, Asuna realized as the light faded. They hadn't lost sight of them at all. The monsters had been completely disintegrated by Yui's spell. The little girl looked back at her dumbstruck parents and friends with eyes of steel, much like Kirito's would be when he was preparing for battle. "I'm not sitting on the sidelines anymore," she declared quietly. Then she shot toward the ground, aiming right at the stone bridge. She landed hard enough to raise a cloud of dust, and a new set of runes whirled about her body. She set herself in between the final rave of Wizen and the dumbstruck shepherds. "Yui, get out of there!" Chrome called out. "You can't! No!" Yui shouted over her shoulder. "I have power just like all of you! I'm not a child to be protected!" Glaring hard at the oncoming Risen, who had resumed their charge, she concentrated harder, the runes swirling faster. "Robin, what is that spell?" Crom asked his friend. "I've never seen anything like it." "That's..." Robin's jaw dropped as he recognized the runes after a short moment. "That's not possible," he gasped. "That magic comes from the Book of Naga!" "What?" Crom shouted as he looked back at the little girl, who raised both of her hands. "Isn't there only one of those?" Before Robin could answer, Yui shouted at the Risen. "Face Naga's truth!" A brilliant flame colored multiple hues, enveloped every single one of the oncoming soldiers. The Risen screamed, but Yui did not waver. She did not lower her hands until every single one of the undead soldiers had been killed by the powerful magic. When it was finished, she looked up at Kirito, who descended on his black wings with a look of wonder on his face. "Yui," he breathed as soon as he landed in front of her. "Where did you learn that?" "Lady Tiki helped me," she replied evenly. "Daddy, I know you want to protect me, but I also want to protect you. It hurts whenever I see you fight without me, because just like in SAO, I can help you now. But I feel like you don't want me to." "Yui, that's not true," Kirito protested. "I just don't want you to have to carry the burden of taking another life. With these Risen, it's different since they're already dead, I guess, but... Daddy," Yui said as she floated up to place a finger on his lips, "I don't want to kill anyone. If it came down to it, I would find it very likely that I would not be able to deliver the final blow to someone. But if I can help you in battle with my powers, I have to. It would be wrong for me to set aside the responsibilities that come with my powers simply because I'm young." Kirito sighed and bowed his head slightly. "I'm sorry, Yui," he said quietly. "You're right. I just want to protect you, but I'm just getting in your way. If you want, you can fight beside your mommy and me from now on." "Thank you, Daddy," Yui said as she floated forward just enough to rest her head on his. "I won't let you down, I promise." And they embraced, with one shedding tears at the loss of the young girl's innocence and damning the necessity of it all.